So it's just one of those things that, you know, Trip's sitting in my lap while little man's running around on the trampoline, and, you know, he has his moments of pure joy, but when he doesn't feel good, then when the medicine wears off, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
So, hey, it's Chris. It's the Chris and Mike show. You froze, man. You're frozen. Frozen. He is frozen like a popsicle. Like
I was frozen for sure.
Boys and girls. That is Mike.
I'm back. And
now you're unfrozen. That was weird, man.
Yeah, that happened at the most inopportune moment.
We were talking about Right, we were talking about my two little grandsons, Trip and Little Man, and Anthony. Little Man's not feeling very well, so we sent him to school anyway, knowing that we probably shouldn't have, because sometimes, you know, kids just know how to play the game. But obviously he wasn't playing the game, because now he's asleep on the couch in the addition, which tells you, he wasn't feeling good.
So for those of you that are following along at home, this is the third time we've attempted to do this episode. So I'll just out us there, because speaking of poor sick kids, Jackson got sick on his birthday and ended up in the ER. So that's no way to spend your birthday, but we did give you a shout out, little buddy. I'm sorry that you were sick, and
we did.
Luckily it was nothing serious. So
right.
It's going around.
Give him a shout out. That's a drag. Being sick sucks. Being sick sucks.
I'm not a fan at all.
All right. So for the listeners at home, let's drop the listen to your sin that you dropped yesterday, that we played yesterday.
Yes.
I'm not going to lip sync it this time, because I'm sitting down and chilling for today's show. But let's let them hear. This is Listen to Your Sin. Is this one of the first songs we wrote together as a band? I mean, you know, I know you already had the music, but lyrically, I think it was one of the first ones that I brought to the table, wasn't it? Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
Most definitely.
Okay.
So this
there
is
you go.
One of the first
and a little
three
background,
songs we
Listen to
ever
Your
wrote.
Sin. It right. And this one resonated with Mike, because it lyrically, it kind of talks about using mind-altering substances, which I never did anything except pot in my day. But Mike was able to relate it to tripping, just based on some of the things I wrote in the song, because I'm a very descriptive writer. So that carried over from journalistic stuff into music. So I like to paint the picture. And I think all the stuff we ever wrote together as a band, I did a really good job painting the picture of whatever I was painting. So this one resonated with Mike because of lyrical content and how it made him think that, oh my God, he's gone on, you know, peyote trips and shit, when I actually hadn't. So, and then live, as Mike's frozen again, live, I would always say, tomorrow doesn't understand. Yesterday will never be again. So take a moment and listen to your sin. kind of sang along with it that time.
I knew you couldn't do it.
He's frozen. He's frozen again.
No, I'm not frozen. I just didn't have my volume up.
It's impossible, man, because it's such a. I mean, not to toot our own horns, but it's such a catchy fucking riff, man, and it's got a hook to it. I mean, a lot of our stuff had such good hooks to it that it just, you know.
I know I'm biased, but I get sucked in every time, so I was right there with you. And for those listening at home,
I do too. And
that's Chris's birthday present. His birthday was Monday, so I remastered that and made it sound as good as I could. It is definitely a demo. The drums were recorded in a 10 by 10 room off the side of a double wide trailer out in Apache Junction. And Chris's vocals, my guitars, and Rick's bass, they were all recorded in my 1-bedroom apartment, if I remember right.
Yeah, no, I was still that yesterday. I was like, oh, that's right. I remember going to his.
I think I was living with Marty at the time.
What?
What? I think when you did your vocals, Marty.
I just remember wherever it was. Because I remembered Marty too as we've been talking and reliving these moments in time. But it was somewhere because I remember going, and I remember it was in an apartment type atmosphere. You know, we weren't cool enough back then to have a studio, like legit, you know, soundproofing walls and shit.
Not yet, no.
But yeah, that's fun. That's a good song. And then just so everybody knows, it did not begin at the beginning of the song because when I sent it away for digital, or when Mike sent it, I sent it to Mike and you sent it away for digital mastering, right?
No, you did it first.
Digital mastering with the put down on. I did it first. They didn't rewind the tape the whole way. They're paid to do one thing, and they didn't rewind it all the way, so it picks up where it picked up. That's not the beginning of the song. The beginning of the song is I got a dream for a common man. We got to fight until the end. Got a dream, and it's quite clear. We're going to fly and disappear. So drop the tablet. Go insane. Feel the juice flow through your veins. You know, listen to your sin, people. So let's have a conversation today and see how long it lasts, shall we?
I think we're good now. We figured out our technical difficulties.
Do we know what episode this is?
This would be number 19.
Yeah. Do we know what episode this is? So 19.3.
This is 19.3.
Get it? 19.3. So we're going to talk about Mike's journey from basically, you know, normal everyday dude into the wrapped into the perils of addiction, and then how he climbed himself out of it. So we can kind of summarize yesterday's conversation, I think, without diving back into it. You came to Arizona in '93. You left home, small town Illinois, at 19 years old. You had the vision to move to Arizona, start a band, a working band, and then a paying band, and take it to worldwide domination.
That was the goal.
Started out as a desperate angel with Scott the drummer and a guy named Mike who was the bass player / singer.
Correct.
That didn't pan out because he ended up having stage fright and was almost impossible to get on to a show one night. So then Scott was like, fuck this. I can't deal with that kind of stress anymore. We need to have somebody who we can count on 100% of the time. Fast forward, you and I bumped into each other at a Candlebox concert. I was singing along with Kevin Martin. You kept looking back at me like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm going to kick your ass. And then half the stage went out and we had a dialogue and realized you were a guitar player and I was a singer. And thus I joined the band. Later on, we brought in Rick, the bass player, William Richard Carr III.
Which we figured out yesterday as well.
And then which was then the four horsemen of the band Desperate Angel, which evolved into Nemesis because I was watching MTV and I don't quote me, but I think the word Nemesis popped up in Pearl Jam's Jeremy song in their video. And that's how I was like, oh, Nemesis, that'd be a great name for the band. And then I brought it to the band and there you go. So kind of fast forwarding that, we were playing out. We were building a following. We were selling our tickets because back then you had to sell tickets to play shows. We were consistent. We were always on time. We always performed at the highest level. And because we had a draw and a following starting to occur, we started getting the opportunities to play in front of national acts like Marshall Tucker Band and Pat Travers and Tony McAlpine. Enough's Enough. This story Mike talked about in previous podcasts that he hung out after the Enough's Enough show, him and Scott, and they ended up partying with the band in the bus, which was a little bit of a yayo, as Pacino's character in Scarface would say, "Chi-Chi, get the yayo," after the chainsaw scene.
That would be
but he never was a huge dabbler, right? He was never a huge dabbler in the cocaine. He was never a huge dabbler in any type of those extreme drugs, as we call them, because we both kind of have alluded in this entire podcast that neither Mike or I believe that marijuana is a gateway drug. Some people do. And we're not saying you're right or wrong. We're just saying in our world, in our beliefs, and how we are, who we are, we just don't think it's anything more than a naturally grown herb on the earth. I think Jesus smoked pot, but I have no proof. I know his mother dropped peyote because all the stories she tells about her son is kind of far fetched. Imagine if Moses, if Moses was running out there with a cell phone, you think he'd do a selfie while he's parting the Red Sea? Oh, look, here I go parting the Red Sea. I don't know. You never know.
They were all 100%.
They didn't have the technology.
Tripping on mushrooms. They didn't have
all kinds of stuff. Absolutely, because it was.
They didn't have the internet.
It was yeah. No, and they had the ability to, opium grew wild, so, I'm sure they incorporated that in meals and shit and teas and all that kind of jazz. So really, Mike and I have never felt that marijuana is a gateway drug at all. And, I've said it before, we had a family member that struggled with some harder drugs. And I always thought, if he could have just been a pothead,
correct,
I would have been fine with that. We would have dealt with it. It wouldn't have destroyed the life, and took down that dark path for the years that it did. So anyway, that is the background of everything that's relevant. So we're going to pick up Mike's story. He gets rear-ended by an asphalt truck. And I meant to ask you this. Did you go after the asphalt truck company? Did you pursue financial damages and shit?
I did. And I made some very bad decisions. Against the advice of my lawyer, who was my uncle. So, in his defense, he tried to talk me out of settling when I did at the time, but we'll just leave it as I had to fund a tour of the Midwest here, and that's not cheap. I was responsible for my portion of, coming back here and playing shows. And
right.
So I settled for medical bills and a little bit of cash, but it wasn't it wasn't what it should have been. So I was a dummy.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what opened Pandora's box for Mike, as he got rear-ended by an asphalt truck in the freeway system in Arizona, and what he thought was major whiplash ended up being causing some vertebrae to completely dislodge, in a sense, into his neck, and he and I both know this because I have my own neck issues. And it creates monumental pain. You don't understand the pain that you go through when you have fucked up vertebrae in your neck unless you've gone through it. And I think Mike will agree with that. You just
100%.
There's no way to explain it. There's just no way to describe it. It's just constant, never ending pain, and it can be dull and it can be sharp, and it just out of nowhere, I was on the treadmill a couple weeks ago, and I was going, where's theory? I was, I don't know, 10%, 10 miles an hour, which is about 6-minute mile. And I was at a 7% incline, and my body just said, fuck you, stop. And I had to stop the treadmill, and I lay down my back on the treadmill itself. And it took me probably 15 minutes to recover from that. And everybody's freaking out because why the fuck is Chris on the ground? What's wrong? Chris is never on the ground. Chris is our motivator. So that's what opened the door of Mike's pain, because the doctors back then would just prescribe fentanyl and Percocet and with no
I don't think we had fentanyl yet.
okay, but we didn't have any. There's no studies. Nobody was paying attention to what these drugs are doing. So, like Mike talked about yesterday, you get the pain pills until the pain is gone. Well, as I just talked about, and as he agreed with neck pain, it doesn't go away. I mean, especially after you get rear-ended by an asphalt truck, and you have two discs that are kind of dislodged. Mine were just fused, so I was lucky in that aspect. So let's take it from there, that you are completely destroying your body with prescribed medication, painkillers, and it's eating you alive. You're losing tons of weight. It's destroying your stomach. You have no appetite. You're spiraling down in this dark, dark tunnel of just absolute addiction chaos.
Yeah, so in their infinite wisdom in the 1990s, the doctors handed out painkillers like candy because they either didn't know or they didn't care. I think it was a little bit of both. But they realized very quickly that these were extremely addictive drugs, and they decided that in their infinite wisdom, I should take a muscle relaxer and a painkiller 3 times a day, every day, because I was in pain. So I did that because I was raised to listen to the doctor and do what they were telling me, because they're a lot smarter than we are. So I just kept taking them, and I was at the point that you just described when I had to reach out to somebody for help. And at that moment in time, the only person I knew to call that was in Phoenix that I trusted was Carrie. So we went to see a different doctor who sent us to a pain management center where they use a robot to inject steroids into your spine where the discs are
and
disintegrating.
That is a freaky story.
Yeah, so I go in there and they explain what they're going to do, and they show you a little video of how the robot works, and basically it's doing it on a dummy in the video. And I'm watching it. The video didn't really scare me that bad. What scared me is when they give you the explanation, like, they sit you in a room like you're buying a new car. So you go from the video room to their office.
Yeah.
And it's like you're in the finance department now.
Right.
Only they're
No
telling
pressure.
you. Yeah. Okay, so you watch the video. So what we need you to do now is we need you to sign this form. And on the form, it says that you understand that when the needle is between your discs, that you could suffer paralysis up to and including death. And that's when my heart started beating like 200 beats a minute, and I'm freaking out.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where I start freaking out.
That would be a trip. That would be a trip for sure.
Then they take you back to the room where they're going to do the actual procedure. And you go in this room that kind of reminds you of something in a science fiction movie, like it would have been on the Enterprise on Star Trek. That's about how big the room was. It wasn't very big. And it was basically a massage table.
No shit.
Yeah. And you lay down with your head in this little donut looking at the floor.
Yeah.
And they tell you, okay.
Right.
The robot's going to start its procedure. And in approximately 15 seconds, you're going to feel a little prick. Don't move. So, long story short, my blood pressure just flatlined after the procedure, thank God. I remember the needle going in, and the next thing I remember is waking up on this warming table wrapped in towels, looking at the nurse going, "What happened?" And she's like, "Oh, welcome back. We thought we lost you." I was like, "Lost me? The fuck?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So later on, Carrie told me the story.
Not a good day.
So from there, obviously her and I got together, as you know, because you sold us a house. And I was not ready for all that business, and I became
that was instant family for someone
But the crazy thing is,
someone who has been completely like, flying solo, and then boom, not married, but boom, wife or girlfriend, 3 kids. Now you're like part of the household structure, and that was the polar opposite of the life that you wanted. So I could see how that was a trigger for you.
And going from being an addict for the first time to being sober, and then realizing that, you know, the band was over and I was still young. I was probably in my late 20s. And, you know, through no fault of hers, I think just whether consciously or subconsciously, I just was not ready for all that. So I became not a nice person. I became impossible to live with. And I don't blame her for making the decision she did, but I had to leave. And at that point, you know, the band's gone. The person that probably the only person I've ever truly loved up to that point in my life, if not ever, you know. So now you're at rock bottom, or what I considered rock bottom. I got nothing. My whole focus of leaving everything I loved back there was to go be successful, and you're that close, and everything you feel like gets swept out from under you. And the job that I was working at got sold to another business who were even worse at running a business than the people that sold it. People that sold it were good at running a business. They just sold it at the most opportune time to make the most amount of money because they saw that business was going downhill. So then it got sold to people that did not know how to run a business. Let me tell the story, right? And we all ended up being out of a job. So now I'm really at rock bottom because I'm unemployed as well. So
no band, no girlfriend. Yeah, no band, no girlfriend, no job, or has a job, but the job kind of sucks. You know, so yeah, I get it, man.
It's important to put that in that context because I'm going to say a million times, as you just said on this podcast, that marijuana is not a gateway drug. Those other drugs are a frame of mind.
Right.
And I was at rock bottom and that opportunity was there. And I said, fuck it. I had detested all that stuff up to that point in my life. And at that point, I was at rock bottom and I said, fuck it, let's just try it. And unfortunately, it stuck hard. So the first time I ever did it, I did it for the next 3 years, every day of my life, or as often as I could, which was pretty much every day because I wasn't working. I was trying to form another band.
And how did and right. And it took the pain away.
Oh, no question. No question. Made you super happy.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if I was going the other way.
This isn't an advertisement, kids.
No.
Yeah.
No, because all it did is make you feel like wherever you were at, you were super happy. And as soon as you would come down, you were sad again. So all it's doing is masking it for however long it lasts, which is why you continue to do it, right? Because you want to continue to be happy. And then you get on that treadmill of,
exactly.
I need more. If you want to know what it's like, kids, listen to Mr. Brownstone by Guns N' Roses. That describes heroin use to a T. I was doing way more meth than I was doing anything, but occasionally we would smoke heroin to come down and go to sleep. And, you know, I've been there, done that on almost every drug you could ever imagine.
The trippy thing, my experience with both, not having done them, but having a family member that was involved in that, we could always tell when it was heroin or meth.
100%.
The demeanor, the tone, the conversation, and the attitude were night and day, completely night and day. Heroin was just, I'm carefree. I'm just, you know, it's a beautiful day. Look at all the colors in the sky, man. You know, and meth was just vile, evil, angry, triggered, anything and every type of negative connotation you can throw against the wall and sticks. That's my experience anyway of somebody doing meth. Nothing ever positive came out of the situation of conversation with that person during that time. Heroin, whole nother story. It's a trip. It was a trip. It's amazing the difference between the two as far as the impact it had on that person. I don't know if it was the same for you because we weren't connected at the time. But that's my outside looking in on that part of it.
I think it's the same for
to that part of it. So
honestly, I think it's the same for everybody, because if you encounter those people, which obviously as an addict you do, you're surrounded by those people. We've discussed that when we were talking about your journey. You know, you have to get away from those people to get away from that lifestyle. So having been around both kinds of people and having done it and been a party to it, that's a perfect description. You know, you should be a singer. You have a way with words.
Sure. Yep. Thank you very much.
So yeah, that's a very good description. And that's how I was living my life. I was either super angry, super negative, or basically, you know, like you said, tiptoe through the tulips.
Right.
But you're not able to function if you're doing too much heroin. So people tend to gravitate more towards things that keep them up and at the party. And that's kind of where I was at in my life. I was basically living at the studio I was working at, and we were doing graphic arts work and photography and sound recording. You know, that's where I was trying to start the band. So
yeah,
I was basically burning the candle at both ends, and through no fault of anybody but my own. You know, I think the one thing that I said yesterday that needs to resonate with people is, from the very beginning, nobody ever forced me to do anything. Not once. You know, it was the exact opposite. If you're hanging out with the right people, their attitude is, more for me. You know, if you don't want any, it's cool. If you want some, it's cool. If you don't, that's cool too. You know, I was never forced to do anything.
Yep.
Somebody either offered and I accepted, or I was like, hey, let me try that.
Right.
So when Chris and I
we have that in common, that it wasn't the Yep. We were going down the same path. It's the same concept. You don't. Nobody ever forced the drink in my hand. Nobody made me drink and drink more and drink more and, you know, more and more and more and more and more. It was all free will, man. All free will.
And that's what I was going to say was, you know, basically we chose to do what we were doing. So to say that, you know, we were hanging out with the wrong people, not necessarily. You know, we felt like the right place at the right time for our life at that time. You know, it's once again, it's a mindset. You know, obviously people on the outside looking in can't understand, because now on the outside looking in, I can't understand either. But I made some really bad decisions at a really bad time in my life, and that's usually when people do it. So, you know, to blame the drugs, yes. When I say certain drugs are horrible, that's because they're horribly addictive and they provide no benefit. To Chris's point, meth heads are thieves. They're mean because everything's a conspiracy. And the part of the story that is so important, to Chris's point, definitely don't do as I say, because as much as it made me feel good, the shitty part was I was paranoid to no end in the beginning, a little bit, but it developed into psychosis. So when I tell you that I understand and I sympathize and I'm compassionate with people who have lost their mind, I was that close, like a human hair away from having to be committed. And I knew it. So that's where that lifestyle leads to if you want to go down that road. I literally was suffering from psychosis. I couldn't leave the house. I was so paranoid, and I had it was like I should have wrote it all down, because it would have made for a fantastic movie. You know, the lead character would have been just crazy.
But nobody thinks of that, man.
No, because I was too paranoid.
Nobody ever nobody ever thinks about going through those struggles. And like, I've had people so many, I don't know how many times, you should write a story about your thing. I'm like, yeah, someday, you know. But yeah, I think that the meth stories and the heroin stories are far more. I don't want to say entertaining because I don't want the message to come across that, oh, go try this, because heroin has destroyed so many lives that, in the everyday world too, not just famous people, not just actors and musicians, and it's just such a detrimental drug and just tears people down and destroys families and shit. So that's not so entertaining isn't the right word, but I think from like the family member that went through it, I always thought it'd be a great book to write from the eyes of that person, because the age of which they partaked in the chaos would be a godsend for parents going through it at different times, in the future, because it's never going away. Um, as insight, So I think if you could remember that kind of stuff, and it'd be a good like tutorial, like this is what not to do. Like I have a good friend, not a really good friend, but I have a good friend named Henry that wrote a book called Running with the Devil, and it's all about his alcoholism. Um, so those types of things I think can be good in a certain context. So, and sharing your stories, enlightening others is beneficial. It's helpful all the way around. So go on with your journey, Mr. Michaels.
Well, I think that's a good segue because I did start out by making it sound very alluring, and it was the first time,
Right.
right? The first time with those drugs,
Yep.
if someone's being honest with you, is always the best time. It's always the first time. Of course, the second time, the third time, the 20th
Oh yeah.
time is very similar to the first time. But what happened was it became necessary very quickly. And that's the problem with those drugs is your body becomes dependent on them. So here's the bad news, kids. The bad news is your body becomes dependent on them. Your body never becomes dependent on marijuana.
Yeah.
Your body becomes dependent on alcohol. Chris's addiction was dangerous because his body could have gone to the point where if he would have continued on, it would have went to the point where his liver would have deteriorated to nothing and he would have died, because that happened to a very good friend of mine and I watched it happen, the bitter end, right after I moved home. And it's a sad thing to see. And
Oh.
the same thing will happen to you doing heroin, and the same thing will happen to you doing meth. Your
Mm-hmm.
body needs it, and the
Right.
withdrawals on it are equally as bad. So I got to the point where I was a daily user, and I did develop psychosis. I had to move in with a friend of mine and basically just dry out. And it took about 6 months before I could leave the house after I quit doing it. So, to give you an idea of how beneficial marijuana is, hold on one second. If I had
Mm-hmm.
not been able to
Okay.
keep
Okay. Okay.
smoking pot during all that, none of my recovery ever would have been
Mm-hmm.
successful, because that's the only thing that saved me. Was it calmed me down enough to deal with the paranoia. So now I'm dealing with being in pain and paranoia at the
Ah.
same time. So the marijuana helped with the pain as well,
Right.
because the
Nice.
withdrawals were
All I was
horrible.
going to interject there was the fact that you did it on your own. Yeah. All I was going to interject in there was the fact that you did that on your own. Like I didn't go to treatments either. I stopped. You heard my story. It was on here before, so I'm not going to mine. But I just stopped. So I appreciate the fact that you just basically stopped. You realized that I got to stop, and that's the big thing, kids. You cannot tell an addict it's time to stop. We will not hear you. We will push you away. We will tell you you are wrong. We'll tell you you have no idea what you're talking about. We are completely in control. We know what we're doing. We know what's good for our body. We know what's bad for our body. There's nothing bad
So
about
true.
this because I can maintain it. I can control it. I'm still doing my job. See, I'm still driving to work every day. I'm still paying my bills. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Addict? I'm not an addict. You're a fucking addict. Like, why are you even fucking in my presence? And all of a sudden, boom, chaos ensues, and you walk away, and that relationship is fractured because you don't want to listen to what they have to say. So we've talked about it before, Mike and I have. Do not approach an addict in your family, your friends, whatever, and tell them they have a problem. If they
No,
ask you, open that can of worms. Do not enable them. Do not enable them. Support them as best you can. Do not give them money. Do not give them access to your home and your belongings when you're not around, because you will not have them when you come back. Not from my case. I didn't steal anything being an alcoholic, but meth addicts and heroin addicts, what ends up happening, right, when they're completely destroyed by the path they're on, which you never got to, thank God, then you start, criminalizing your life because you have to chase the next high. So thank God you realized what the fuck was going on before you hit that catastrophic point, because then we could maybe not be having this conversation now, because you'd be behind bars in the federal penitentiary, and you can't do podcasts behind bars. It just doesn't work. There's too much concrete,
This is true.
all around the walls. So so continue, please. I wanted to hit that on the head there, so people understood our point of view on the things as we talk about your journey, which is quite compelling, by the way. So continue sharing.
Well, I'll give you a good behind the scenes story to further dispel the rumor that any of this was fun in the end.